Hello and welcome back to No Bullshit. Today we return to talking about the ongoing controversy surrounding a certain sleeping giant nation in the Far East, who continues to ban loads of Americans in our media products as a way to exert their authoritarian ways over popular media and thus the world. This time it's world-renowned director Quentin Tarantino, who is having his work censored by the ban-heavy communist government in China. His most recent movie, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, was a smash hit earlier this year too, over the summer, and it was also a favorite for this channel and many of you the viewers at the same time too, because of how the movie was anti-politically correct, and how it had an anti-social justice warrior angle to the story and presentation of it too. We don't have too much time to get into all of that here, but I do have links to my previous Once Upon videos below if you want to catch up. But basically, to sum things up quickly, Quentin Tarantino doesn't give a shit about being PC. This has already been pretty obvious for years, since he already tends to make very bloody, very graphic, and overly violent films, in highly stylized and very artistic ways, of course. They're awesome. But these kinds of anti-politically correct productions are just the beginning of why his movie triggered many. In addition to his signature style, Quentin also tackled a lot of SJW issues almost head-on in this story, by having them incorporated into parts of the Once Upon plot. The most obvious example is when Leonardo DiCaprio's character yells at and condemns a group of hippies outside his home, and the hippies pretty clearly represent PC and SJW types in the present, since they even blame Hollywood and the actors and their violent products for making the world a more violent place, as they did in the past and as they do these days too. This of course is very similar to what SJWs do in the present, like when they attack video games or movies like The Joker, saying the violent parts of these media properties will make real people become violent too. And when Once Upon came out a few months back, Tarantino received a fair share of that stupid criticism too, as he has throughout his career over the years. So it's really no surprise that in his new movie he actually addressed this issue straight up, and furthered our anti-PC side with his take on this whole situation. And besides parts within the new movie, Quentin Tarantino also stood up to the SJWs in public in real life, particularly one time in a now infamous interview where some lefty reporter tried to attack the guy for not having enough women in his film and women not being on screen for enough minutes, in order to appease this reporter and other SJWs like him. This silly question caused Quentin to go off on the guy, or lady, I don't remember the gender, but Quentin should have gone off on them. And this reaction truly showed that Tarantino was our guy, and he still is. And he's one of the last badass anti-PC directors and filmmakers out there today. And also, this nature of his is what's led to today's news story as well. The reason Quentin Tarantino and his movie Once Upon a Time in Hollywood are back in the news this week is because the movie was recently supposed to be released in China, a market Tarantino's movies have rarely been able to be exposed to, considering the Red Nation's tendency to censor things. And well, as you might have already guessed, this long-awaited Chinese release for the film didn't end up happening. For more details on how and why, let's turn to an article from The Hollywood Reporter called China Cancels Release of Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, exclusive. Check this bullshit out. Sources tell The Hollywood Reporter that Bruce Lee's daughter made a direct appeal to China's National Film Administration for changes to her father's controversial portrayal in the film. Now, the movie's China backer Bonafilm Group is said to be frantically working with Tarantino on a new cut to salvage the release. Wow, what a party pooper. So a fictional version of Bruce Lee loses a fight in Tarantino's movie, and that makes his daughter go and run and cry to China about it? What a joke. And this just makes Bruce Lee and his family look even more weak and overly confident, which was exactly the point of the scene in Once Upon a Time in the first place. For those who don't know, there's a scene where a fictionalized version of Bruce Lee is on a movie set with Brad Pitt's character in the movie. They get into a little argument and then eventually a fight, albeit it is a friendly bout and for fun, sort of. They're fighting for sport in front of everyone, and I think there was a bet placed on it. And this whole scene was done to not only show how over the top and how much of a hothead, little guy, Napoleon complex suffering figure Bruce Lee was, but also, more importantly, it was done to build up Brad Pitt's character, Cliff, to show how much of an actual badass he is. But apparently, having a little fun with Hollywood history is no longer allowed in current year, especially when your uptight daughter will not think twice about having an even more uptight Asian government get involved and get your movie's premiere canceled. In a shocking twist, not unlike the ending of a Quentin Tarantino film or two, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood's China box office ambitions appear to be going up in flames. The critically acclaimed movie starring Leonardo DiCaprio and Brad Pitt had been approved for release in China on October 25th, but regulators have abruptly reversed course. worse. According to multiple sources close to the situation in Beijing, who asked not to be named because they weren't permitted to speak publicly about the matter, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood's local release has been indefinitely put on hold. The film would have been Tarantino's first proper release in China, and the country's enormous market was expected to push the title's worldwide box office total past the $400 million mark. It has earned $366 million to date. The abrupt change-up comes as a blow to both Sony Pictures and the film's Chinese financier, Beijing-based Bonafilm Group. Really says a lot when these Chinese sources' names and identities have to be hidden, for fear that speaking out like this could get them fired, arrested, or even worse. God forbid. And this is all just about some American movies released there. So imagine if you dared to speak out about something more serious, like speaking out against the Chinese government or their president. God forbid anyone get caught doing that in China. Regardless, the damage has been done here though, and this Tarantino film's release there is certainly in jeopardy, and likely will never happen. All over a portrayal of Bruce Lee that got his daughter so butthurt, she went and ran and tattletaled to the Chinese government like a big baby. This big baby named Shannon Lee, well, she's no young buck anymore either. At 50 years old, you'd think she would have grown thicker skin by now, or maybe she could just be happy her dad was such an influential star, he's still being talked about 50 years after the height of his career, and many years after his death. Sure, the movie may have goofed on him a bit, but it certainly wasn't that bad. Not bad enough to warrant all this drama, that's for sure. In fact, I would say no portrayal, no matter how bad, would warrant this kind of censorship. Really, what's happening here is the Bruce Lee estate is enlisting the help of a communist government in order to protect Lee and his Chinese-American legacy from any criticism whatsoever. Kind of fitting since the Chinese government does the same kind of censorship and rewriting of their own history for themselves. And it all just seems pretty ironic too, since Shannon Lee's father pretty much left China in order to become an American and a film star here. And also, Bruce Lee took an American wife, who's Shannon's mother, of course. So Shannon Lee, in turn, grew up almost fully American while living in America, and now, 50 years later, and she's regressing to her abandoned Chinese roots, asking that detestable nation use their communist powers of censorship to protect her father from a meaty-head portrayal that most would know was fictional to begin with, and also somewhat accurate. What a mess this scene has become. Next, Tarantino makes us proud here once again too, as he has now officially refused to re-edit his movie in order to appease the authoritarian communists out east. This is a bold and strong and very American move by our boy Quentin, who could have easily sold out and re-edited and caved in and cut out the whole Bruce Lee scene altogether if he wanted to. That's what Disney or Blizzard or the NBA would have done here, as they have shown to be willing to kowtow to China in the past, in recent history. But not Quentin Tarantino. He has more principles, and also, more importantly, he also has final cut on his film, meaning Tarantino has final say on his movie and it can't be meddled with or recut without his permission. For more information on Quentin Tarantino standing his ground here and refusing to kowtow to the Middle Kingdom, let's check out an article from NBC News called "Quentin Tarantino Won't Recut Once Upon a Time in Hollywood After Film is Pulled in China." Check this one out. Director Quentin Tarantino has no plans to recut Once Upon a Time in Hollywood after Chinese regulators pulled the movie a week before it was scheduled to be released in the country on Friday, a source told The Hollywood Reporter. While regulators have not offered an explanation for the decision, sources told the outlet that the movie's portrayal of martial arts legend Bruce Lee as an overly cocky, pompous loser could be to blame. Lee's daughter, Shannon Lee, reportedly made a bid to the country's National Film Administration, calling on it to require Tarantino, who has final cut rights, to alter her father's portrayal. Shannon Lee and others, including basketball star Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, have criticized the movie for reducing Bruce Lee to a punchline. In one scene that's received backlash, Lee, played by Mike Moe, challenges stuntman Cliff Booth, portrayed by Brad Pitt, to a fight. Booth ends up throwing a cocky Lee against a car so hard it crushes the side, proving that Booth is still a worthy stuntman even though his career appears to be struggling. Critics argue that the scene exploits the martial arts legend by making him merely a narrative vehicle. Okay, well, here we got more details on Quentin Tarantino standing his ground, and also a more in-depth look at the controversial Bruce Lee scene and portrayal, which we discussed briefly before. As I said initially, I think most would just see this as a funny goof on a classic martial arts actor, who really shouldn't be this highly regarded and untouchable anyway, like how his daughter and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar seem to claim he is. Sure, Bruce Lee was a legend, a legendary actor who made amazing movies, sure, but he also didn't discover America, or land on the moon, or cure cancer, or anything serious like that. He's just an above-average actor who brought his own brand of intense martial art performances to America, sure, and it was done in amazing ways, but it doesn't put him above criticism or even above parody like what's being done here. Frankly, I think many had completely forgotten Bruce Lee even existed until Quentin Tarantino put him in this movie as a character. And rather than focusing on this making Bruce Lee look funny, I would stick to the film Once Upon and how this scene was actually more intended to make its main character look badass. And in a way, that makes Lee look legit here too, because defeating Bruce Lee in a fight wouldn't make Brad Pitt's character Cliff look so cool if it weren't for Bruce Lee already being such a fighting legend. Tarantino responded to the criticism, doubling down on his portrayal of the martial artist at a press conference in Moscow in August, claiming that Bruce Lee was kind of an arrogant guy. Shannon Lee fired back in an interview with Variety, suggesting the director could shut up about the issue. That would be really nice, she told the outlet, or he could apologize or could say, I don't really know what Bruce Lee was like, I just wrote it for my movie. But that shouldn't be taken as how he really was. For many Asian American men who have had a history of being emasculated in Hollywood, Bruce Lee remains an important figure representing strength and power. Because of status as a martial artist icon, the actor avoided being regulated to the nerdy, sexless tropes that existed for Asian men at the time. Well, nice, I guess. At the end here, they even try and low-key call Tarantino some kind of anti-Asian racist, bringing up common film tropes and Asian male stereotypes of the time. Never mind the fact that Bruce Lee started his own stereotype of Asian males being crazed martial artists with hot heads and big tempers, but that's besides the point. Really, we're all supposed to pretend here that Bruce Lee wasn't at least a little bit arrogant and somewhat full of himself, which is pretty apparent to anyone familiar with his history and anyone who's been paying attention. Not to say Lee was terrible or the worst either, but also no one is perfect as well. But according to his daughter, who, no offense, but she's got to be rather biased on the guy for one, and also Lee died tragically while Shannon was still a child. So her memories of her dad are being built up in her head and being told to her secondhand by stories from others. So it's kind of hard to think Shannon has an unbiased view of things here, or that she would even admit her late great legendary dad had any flaws at all. And that's kind of understandable too. To be fair here, it is hard to blame Shannon for this too much. She did lose her dad at a very young age, and that's very sad, but also her getting movies banned like this over 40 years later is a bit of an overreaction. She needs to get over it. And looking in from the outside as we are, Tarantino is clearly the one in the right here, and he's especially badass for refusing to cave in, despite the temptation of making lots of more money clearly being out there. What do you guys think? Should China have banned this movie over the Bruce Lee portrayal? Was it rather off-putting for Shannon Lee to tattletale to them because of it making her dad look bad, supposedly? And how cool is it that Quentin Tarantino is standing his ground and refusing to re-edit and kowtow to the communists in the Far East? Comment your thoughts on everything below, and thanks for watching No Bullshit. Hit that like button if you enjoyed this video, and we'll see you all next time.